Hey guys, so I guess this is going to be a fun little project to breathe a little bit of fresh life into this rusty, crusty 2002 24 valve Cummins. The bed was so bad. I think maybe if you watch any of my Facebook or Instagram stuff, you've seen just how bad the bed was. I probably should have recorded a little more of the process of taking it off, but it was fun. I used the grapple on the ASV skid steer and ripped it off. And so what I've done so far is I've pressure washed with the high pressure, they call it like the 0-degree nozzle. Got all the rust off, took a sledgehammer and knocked as much off as I could. And then I went and finally found a cheap enough flatbed. So, you know, I'm one of those people where I don't want to spend more on the vehicle in parts than the vehicle cost. But I did want a quality flatbed. So this is a Bradford built flatbed. And actually, funny enough, I lived in Washington, Kansas for a year, or just outside of Washington for a year. I was on bowling league there. And I also got an internship offer when I was in college, an engineering internship offer, which I didn't take it, but if I wanted to, I could have worked at Bradford Built. So I've always wanted one of their beds. I finally got one. I got it for $1,200. So this thing was disgusting. I pressure washed it. I'm gonna pop all the lights out and we're gonna paint this thing. This also came with like this slider hitch or whatever you call it, where I can't do it because it's sitting on this pallet, but you lift this up, it moves these pucks around inside, and then this will slide side to side to make it easier to hook up your trailer. And then when you pull forward, those pucks automatically fall back into place and straightens out your hitch, so then it doesn't move. But they welded this whole thing on, so I'm going to cut this garbage off, weld a 2.5-inch receiver back on, and then I actually got to use the new CNC plasma table to cut a plate out to kind of replace what they had removed. So we'll weld this guy in there, and then the receiver tube will get welded around there. So really the next step, I'm waiting for the wind to die down in the next day or two, and then we're gonna spray this down with something phosphate. I can't ever remember what it's called. That's gonna be delivered today. That basically kind of neutralizes your rust so you can paint over it without the rust continuing to spread underneath the paint after you paint it. And then I just got done building these. So this is 2x1 1/8-inch wall. I had to do 2 of them. I had to do a little spacer because the fuel tank, it would have rubbed here on the fuel tank and it would have been uncomfortably close over here. And you can actually see that bed was so rusty, the cross member broke. So the bed was rubbing on the fuel tank. The previous owner lied to me. He said there were no problems with the bed. You can see he actually put a bunch of RTV over the tank where it wore a hole through it. So I noticed that cross member was touching the fuel tank, and that's kind of what sparked this flatbed project, because I could not keep that bed on any longer or the fuel tank was going to be completely ruined. I just got some 12mm bolts, so I'm sure should have went with 3/16 wall. It was double the cost of this tubing, like straight up double the cost per pound of this tubing. Probably should have went with like a 14mm bolt, or maybe even a 16mm. That's like 5/8, basically 9/16 or 5/8 inch. But here's my reasoning. This frame is so freaking rusted that if I'm gonna bend this tubing by overloading the flatbed, I'm probably gonna buckle the frame. So I'm not going to be trying to haul 2 hay bales on this flatbed or anything stupid like that. I can't really give you a good shot from up here, but there is a big kind of crack in the frame just from rust. So eventually I'll probably use the new plasma table to cut out some scab plates or fish plates, whatever you want to call them, to weld over that to try to beefen up that spot. But this frame looks like it came off the ocean floor, because this guy used the truck for snow plowing and then made the mistake of putting the salt spreader in the bed. You know, the plow isn't really the problem, it's the salt spreader. And apparently he just never washed the truck. Granted, the truck has 405,000 miles on it, so it's seen plenty of road salt just on its own, just from driving. But my point is, I don't care that this might not be the heaviest duty thing possible. I really wanted to go with a 2x2 3/16 wall, but then I found out I would have had to have another 1-inch spacer, and at that point it would have raised the bottom, like where those louvers are, it would have raised that up 3 inches from the bottom of my window. Because I'll let you in on a little detail here quick. These frame rails were kind of their own width. I guess Ford and Chevy must have had wider frame rails back in the 90s, early 2000s. So Bradford actually had 2 widths of beds. This is going to be the more common wider width. They used to make a Dodge specific bed for these kind of goofy, narrower frames. And the point is, the C channels that run underneath that, the frame rails on that, would just line up with this. And so you could actually just put your bolts through their C channel into your frame. And then up front, how your perches kind of come off to the edge, then you'd have these kind of angle irons, and you would put your bolt through there into your front perches. And then if you can see back here, they would take just a piece of flat plate. See that guy with 2 holes right there? They would run that down, and that would kind of beefen it up for towing with your bumper hitch and your gooseneck ball. I'm not putting this on to do any towing, other than maybe yanking one of those wood trailers around for firewood, if I ever run out of firewood. My main purpose for the flatbed was to protect the fuel tank, make the bed usable again, obviously. And then I'm probably going to go find another one of those IBC totes. I'm going to cut the top off, fill it up with some clay for weight, just so I have a little more rear end traction when I'm plowing snow. Because that should be a really easy way. Last winter, I filled the bed up with firewood. That was kind of a messy deal. I think the tote, I can use the forks right there on the skid steer to load the tote, and then take it right back off if I don't want it. And there's nothing really heavier than clay, other than gold or lead. So here we are with phase 2 complete. Just got done spraying on the phosphoric acid, let that sit for 30 minutes, then thoroughly rinsed it off with the high pressure nozzle on the pressure washer. So to get it to work the best, you want to leave it on as long as possible. With this amount of surface area, the really bright sunlight, and the wind starting to pick up, it's going to be tough to keep this wet for very long. So lesson learned on my end, need to do this kind of project first thing in the morning when the west side of the shop is under the shade. It's cooler, there's no direct sunlight, and I can keep this thing wetter longer. But now we have to let the water dry completely before we can paint. So now we do want sunlight. Now we do want this thing to warm up and dry off. So this isn't going to be nearly as impressive since I only let it sit for 30 minutes. Basically I sprayed 1 gallon of solution on. So I actually only used 1 quart of the phosphoric acid and about a gallon of water. And I'll show you that here in a minute, but I just wanted to show you what this looks like. Again, it's not super impressive. I've done these projects several times, and your rusty metal can come out looking pretty cool if you let it sit long enough and you keep it wet the whole time. This stuff is so rusted, it would probably take hours of being soaked in the phosphoric acid before it really completely converted. But it kind of etches in and it gives your paint better adhesion. I found, especially when painting an engine block, doing a phosphoric acid bath will help the paint stick 10 times better than just degreasing it and pressure washing it. So here's a little bit of a spot where you can see it looks like bare steel, like new silver shiny steel. So that's one result you can get. Or the other thing I'll see is it actually turns black, like a really dull flat black. So here is our chemical. I really don't even want to touch this bottle without gloves. This is 85% phosphoric acid, and you're going to mix this so that you dilute it down to between 10 and 20%. So I mix this with distilled water, and to get basically a rough 20% concentration, I do 3 parts water to 1 part phosphoric acid. And that works great in a spray bottle because they come with graduations up to 32 ounces. So you just put 24 ounces of water in and 8 ounces of phosphoric acid. And this is essentially the same thing all of these rust converters off the shelf are going to do. So the way I found out about this, I originally bought this Pour 15 metal prep. Now this stuff is anywhere between $30 and $50 for this gallon. It's already diluted down to 10% phosphoric acid. The rest is water, and then they have some zinc phosphate in there. Now that is one thing I would like to play with, is the zinc phosphate, but this stuff works amazing for a metal prep, but it's ridiculously overpriced. Think about that. Right now this is about $50 for 1 gallon. It's 10%. This was less than $50 for a gallon. It was about $45 for a gallon. I'll put a link in the description. You can actually get it off Amazon. That's where I got this stuff. It's cheaper to get it off Amazon instead of directly from Duda Energy. But think about that. About $45 for a gallon of concentrate versus $50 for 10%, 1 gallon. Way cheaper to just make it yourself. Now, a word of caution. I would wear a paint suit, like a full body paint suit, or at a very minimum, I would wear long sleeves, long pants, latex gloves, or nitrile gloves. But really, I would do a full body paint suit with the hood and then wear goggles, because this stuff will make your skin itch like crazy. Now that I'm done using it, I'm going to store this outside. Plastic does not contain acid. It will permeate through there and it will rust things out. It would be better if this was a glass jug to actually contain it, but since this is in plastic, I've already learned this the hard way also. Store all of your acids far away from any metals that you don't want rusting. All right, we got the next phase complete. So I got the primer laid down. So on our spacers here, since that's all new steel, I use self-etching primer. Just use that out of the aerosol can. And then on everything else, I went with the Rust-Oleum Rusty Metal Primer out of a can, out of a gallon jug. So it's actually the oil-based stuff. It's completely different stuff than what you get out of an aerosol can. So it does take longer to dry. Technically, they don't want you to coat this until it's fully dry. And all the can says is usually within 24 hours. But I will tell you, if you thin this with acetone, that will change how it dries, versus if you just dump it straight out of the can into your spray gun. About 5% is all you really want to thin with acetone. And they don't tell you that either. It's kind of hard to see rusty colored primer on rusty metal, but we got her laid down, so we got some good sunshine. We'll let that dry before we start shooting the black. Alrighty, we just got done. I just got done laying down the black. So I was using up some old paint. Did semi-gloss on the chassis. I bet this looks way better in video than it does in real life. At least it's black. Doesn't stick out like a rusty sore thumb. And I did a pretty good job of not painting the fuel tank. Here you can see I would have been better off either wire wheeling this or having it sandblasted, because all that old flaking paint looks pretty terrible. I did use the high pressure nozzle. They call it a whirlybird. It's a 0 degree rotating nozzle, but it didn't strip this off. I don't know if this is powder coat or paint. I know when I toured Bradford built back in like 2011, they were powder coating. It's black. It looks way better than it did. So next step is to figure out how to lift it so I can set it on the truck. These pins in single shear, you know, I'm sure people would say, oh, pick up from your 4 eyelets. I'm not going to trust that. Hopefully we can do that tomorrow, because it's supposed to rain tomorrow night. So now we've got our tubes bolted on. I just took a piece of 2-inch painter's tape and covered up where the channels of the flatbed are going to get welded to. That way I don't have to actually go back and remove paint. I'll set the bed on, get it positioned, weld it on, and then just come back underneath and rattle can that so that part doesn't rust. So now I just have to figure out how to lift this thing. I sat there all night last night pondering what the best way to lift it would be. I think I'm going to put a chain down through these pockets and then put the hook on the side of the stake pocket, and then I can back this underneath. Well, we're going to try to do this by myself, I guess. I can't get anybody to come over and help me out. Just did kind of an X pattern here through the stake pockets, chain binders to take up the slack. Had to pop the emergency escape hatch on the roof so I can get in and out when the arms are up. So we'll lift her up and try it out. All I got to really do is get it to sit on the rails, set it down, and then I should be able to move it around by hand to get it to its final spot. So I'm actually pretty dang impressed with how level this is front to back. You know, it's not sloping like that, and then you can just use the tilt of the bucket to level it right to left. That actually went way smoother than I thought it was going to go. I thought I was going to have to get out and into the skid steer like 15 times to get things lined up. The only thing that needed to adjust was I had to back up to slide it forward about 1 inch, and then this back corner needs to come over about 1/4 inch this way, and that's it. I got lucky there. So now I just got to get the lights put in. I'll do a little bit of touch up with some rattle can paint, and I'm probably going to order LED lights because this had incandescent bulbs on it. Crawl under and throw a couple welds on, and should be good to go. So you can see this sits high, which I don't care for. That's 2 inches higher than this would have sat if this was a purpose-built specific model for this 2nd gen. And you can see there how the window doesn't line up. That's off by 2 inches. But for a rusty old work truck that I'm only going to use for plowing snow or either driving in the winter or the rest of the year when it's raining and really muddy, I think it'll work just fine. Okay, so the last 2 things we got to do here. The filler neck on this one, this is like a Chevy that it came off of. I believe the only difference is where they put the hole in the side, and then you can put what they call this sump. I don't really know why they call it a sump, but you can put this anywhere. I didn't want to hole saw a new hole further back and then have this ugly hole there. And I'm going to stone two birds here because the vent tube portion of my factory filler neck is rusted through. So anytime I try to fill the tank all the way up, then it leaks out through the filler for the filler neck vent. So I ordered a new filler neck. This was pretty easy to modify. There's a little piece of flat welded to hold these two pieces together. I cut that. I put this in the vise. I flattened this bend a little bit. I flattened this bend a little bit. Then I cut this. I cut like a pie section out, welded it back together. Paint's drying right now. I just got to run to town here and get a new section of 1.5-inch fuel filler hose and get that installed. And then I did have to drill my 3 holes for the Bradford built sump, as they call it, to put my factory screws back in. So I'm only using 3 instead of 4. And actually pretty simple, and now I shouldn't have leaks every time I fill up. And we got our filler neck figured out here. So what I ended up having to do was go to Napa, get 18 inches of new 1.5-inch diameter fuel line, and I was able to just slide the extra of the vent tube or the vent hose over the tube. Fits like a glove. I was able to fill this thing up on the max fill setting, which a lot of times filler necks with flatbeds give you problems. I was able to fill at max speed. I was able to top it off, didn't spill a drop. Pretty exciting stuff. I made a point when I was welding it to always keep the tube and hose going down. You don't ever want to have an air trap, because then that's when you're going to have issues. So once I got the paint on and everything cured, went around with the Milwaukee grease gun, powered some grease into these things, and this moves very freely now. I went in with penetrating oil and some graphite spray lube to get all these guys and get this. So this thing just works slicker than snot now. These all fold out if you ever want to tie anything down. I don't know why you would ever want to put a board in there. I guess maybe if the truck didn't come with these, I'm not really sure. Only thing you got to be careful on is this side will hit that light if it's sticking out at all. And then I went to Menards and got a pressure treated outdoor waterproof 2x6. Cut that down, and if it's ever stuck, you just flip one side down and it pops out. So that is the end product. I'm pretty stoked about this. I think it's really gonna let me use this truck again. That bed was so terrible that was on it. It's almost completely unusable, and it did wear a hole through the fuel tank at one point. So I did a test this morning with an IBC tote, 330 gallons of fuel. That's over 2,500 pounds of weight. Went and drove down the road, had 0 issues. So, and the reverse lights are freaking awesome. The LEDs, I bought 4 new LED reverse lights, and it's just like a light bar. They just light up the whole world. Went from probably going to sell this thing to now I can't stop driving it because it sounds awesome. I think these 24 valves are probably the best sounding Cummins of all the 5.9s and 6.7s. And now I can actually pull the wood trailer behind it, because the other one, the receiver was completely rusted through. So new receiver welded on there. This might be my screw around truck now, and if I get hit, somebody runs a stop sign, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. So as always, thanks for tuning in, guys. Remember to wear your proper eye protection when you're running the plasma cutter, or you get to go through an awesome eye burn like I did. I was wearing a tinted shield and sunglasses. It still wasn't enough. It just wasn't a dark enough shade, apparently. It didn't hurt when I was cutting, but hopefully a couple more days with this pirate patch, I'll be back to good as new. So catch you in the next video, guys.